with our brothers and our sisters. Together we will stand. Yeah, there's power in our union.
Welcome to the Long Island Fed News. I'm John Durso, your host, with Roger Clayman and Ryan Stanton, a monthly podcast of the Long Island Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO. Roger, what's happening?
We're looking at very positive news about America because we have a good Congress and we have a president who cares about working families. The things that are said in D.C. by the president of the United States have an impact. When he says there should be no interference in union elections, people listen and it changes the discussion. When you look at the New York Times, and almost every day, it's like it's a union publication because there's an article about working people in it and about their impact of the conditions they work under their lives, on their lives, and how that affects our economy. We're talking about infrastructure now. We've been waiting a long time to talk about infrastructure. We have a proposal that came from D.C. It became law, $1.9 trillion put into our economy already. And now we're talking about the different ways we can invest in America to make us stronger. And John, you and I have talked about this for years, how important infrastructure is to Long Island.
Without question, it is amazing to see the change in the conversation in this country since January 20th. It has been remarkable. And the fact that we're talking about infrastructure, like I said, I mean, our roads, our bridges, our highways, it's wonderful because it'll revitalize the entire economy, put people to work. Not since Eisenhower was president will we see a program such as this. In Newsday, former Congressman Steve Israel did an op-ed just recently on infrastructure and how important it is. And that's a voice that we miss in Washington, Congressman Israel. But it is a great article, and for our listeners, they should look it up because it is absolutely worthwhile reading.
John, we talked about what's inherently significant for Long Island. One of the great benefits of living on Long Island is you live around the shore. You have natural surroundings that are beautiful. We have the best schools, but that doesn't happen without an investment. And you and I have been talking since we got to the Long Island Fed about the third track and about transportation and what the significance of that is to us. And that got done, but that was an initiative that we really did without the support of the federal government.
Oh, absolutely. I was only speaking with Ryan about that just a short time ago. That was in 2005. Jack Kennedy, Matt Crossan, and you and I met, and we agreed. We signed that agreement, if you remember, because Joe Bruno was kind of concerned that we would not support any politician for a re-election if they did not support the third track and the DiNapoli-Balboni bill on housing.
And just real quick for our listeners, Matt Crossan is the former head of the Long Island Association, and Jack Kennedy is the former president of the building trades.
That's right.
That
and they both should rest in peace. Two great Long Islanders, but also followed by two also great Long Islanders who have led both organizations over the years. But that was a significant agreement because it had never been done before. It was an agreement between business and labor on a political issue that meant the future of Long Island. I remember you and I having conversations with then Senator Chuck Fuschillo about the third track, about putting money in there and those conversations. So seeing this getting done, and we're thankful to Kevin Law and Dave Capel and a lot of those folks who helped bring this together. But it wouldn't have happened without the power and the dedication of not only Anthony Simon and his folks, but Governor Cuomo in making sure that this gets done. And it'll make a big game changer for Long Island and this region.
And I remember getting yelled at by Senator Balboni, even though we were supporting the Balboni-DiNapoli bill. But we felt bad about making them angry at the time, but don't feel so bad about it now, because this led the way to a whole new way of looking at getting things done here on Long Island. So, Ryan, could you run down for us some of the issues in infrastructure that we are addressing through federal legislation?
Yeah, sure. So you guys just gave a little history lesson on the third track, and ultimately what came from that is a coalition of organizations in the region that ultimately recognize on an ongoing basis how valuable it is to work together. One of the things we're working together on now is sewer infrastructure, in particular in Suffolk County, where 70% of our residents do not have treated sewage. So for everybody not aware, 70% of households have a cesspool, and ultimately that's leaching into our bay and affects our drinking water. So, whether it's through the American Rescue Plan, which is the $1.9 trillion package that has passed and been signed into law by the administration, or whether it's through funding through a future infrastructure package, it's vital that Suffolk County and the organizations we just referenced continue to work together to ensure that we can invest in our infrastructure, because as a region that we are an island, a significant portion of our economy dates back to not just our infrastructure investment, which we know puts people to work, but also tourism, right? We're surrounded by water, and if we continue to pollute, we're going to continue to harm our economy. And so really just investments in infrastructure, and in particular sewer infrastructure, are going to be vital to the future of this region.
Just a brief aside, talking about sewers, and of course, whenever you talk about sewers, I think of Adrienne Esposito, because that's one of her big concerns. She'll abuse me for referring to her as sewer girl, but I think she gave herself that name. But I was on a call just the other day, and I did not realize that sections of the North Shore of Nassau County are also not sewered. I was not aware of that, and quite a bit. And there's a whole discussion about using dollars from the American Rescue Plan that will help that area too, because unlike Suffolk County, as you said, is 70% not sewered. Nassau County is mostly sewered, but that one section up in the Glen Cove and that area is also not sewered. So it is a Long Island issue. And again, because we sit on such a vital piece of real estate, we have to make sure that our drinking water and our economy are all tied together as the future.
As you endearingly referred to Adrienne as sewer girl, I think she probably is self-proclaimed sewer girl, but she's also, just as you mentioned, a vital partner to us in this endeavor, in this initiative. I know her and Roger have worked extremely closely, laying the groundwork for a lot of the good work we've already been able to do with regard to sewer infrastructure expansion.
And there's so much being proposed by the Biden administration now that takes into consideration needs that we've struggled to meet here locally and on the state level, scraping together dollars. But the whole transportation infrastructure of the country, you can start with roads and bridges, which are crumbling. You then can talk about the rail network in this country, which is horrible and a disgrace, particularly if you go to Europe or go anywhere and you see the investments being made. And I think there's a perfect intersection between foreign policy and our investments in making America great the right way by putting money into our infrastructure, which we haven't done. And that's how we compete in the world.
Yeah, it's been Infrastructure Week for about 16 years.
Yes. And, other presidents have talked about it, but Biden is actually doing something about it. And just as a point, America is already great. Okay, it's just going to be that much better because the roads will be safer and you'll be able to move about better. But one of the other things that I think is really critical is the need for the expansion of broadband. And that is an essential part of the American Rescue Plan and the infrastructure. So maybe, Ryan, you could expand a little bit about that. But, with considering the fact that students have been home for a year, it has really exacerbated the fact that broadband in so many areas is not available. And with even the greater use, because everybody is home, you need to see that we need to upgrade that. So, Ryan, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, folks think about Long Island, they think everybody's wealthy, and we know that's not to be true. We're a population of millions of people, and we have more people in poverty than some folks have in their entire region. And with that, access to broadband becomes an issue. And it just perpetuates inequality, because if you don't have access to broadband, when your entire school district goes remote, you don't have access to education. And so they're all tied together. In this country, we've talked about basic things like water and access to power generation and telecommunications, and we've named them as utilities because they're sort of necessary for civilization. And where we've come to in the world, broadband is pretty much necessary for civilization to succeed. And so if we don't name it a utility, or if we don't make significant investments, we're really disadvantaging those that are already disadvantaged. And so the Biden administration and, the New York State legislature, along with the governor, just passed some new policy specific to this issue, putting a cap on out-of-pocket expenses and based on a person's income in an effort to make broadband more affordable. And so that's good and that's great. But you have areas, even on Long Island, the town of Brookhaven, the town of Riverhead, that don't have access to Verizon Fios, even though Verizon has a franchise agreement with those municipalities. Maybe not currently, but at some point they did, and have opted not to build out. So we need to do something in this country, not only to incentivize, but hopefully require corporations that are profiting in the billions on a monthly basis to do that build out and to ensure that we have the infrastructure necessary to compete in the world.
Absolutely. I remember the rally we had with the Verizon workers when Mark Lesko was the supervisor, and trying to get Verizon to come into the area. And it's to this day, now that's quite a few years ago, they just have turned a deaf ear to the needs of the region.
So we need the investments that will make it possible and require that it's possible for all communities. And we know that over the years, the broadband providers tend to cherry pick the neighborhoods that bring in the most revenue, but it doesn't necessarily serve the people who have the least very well, and including people who are really middle-class neighborhoods, as you find throughout Brookhaven, who just don't have that agreement to bring Fios to them.
Not to mention, it's somewhat of a union-busting tactic, right? You're eliminating work for union workers, people that are doing good work to ensure access to information and education in our communities. And the companies, by not making those investments, are eliminating that work for folks that are providing for our communities. So it's not only disadvantaging those that reside here, but it's really it's a deliberate decision by the corporation to not have to deal with their union.
And there's some other ways that we are combining state initiatives, which have been on the table for a while, with now a federal commitment. And this is particularly in the area of renewable energy and addressing climate change. The commitments are remarkable. The same kinds of intentions to have carbon-free power generation in the country are matching what New York has projected to do by 2035. And in the state, in the budget, there were commitments to union protections and for worker protections within the renewable energy commitments that the state is planning to make. For example, in the construction of all the wind farms that we expect to see, 9 gigawatts off the coast of Long Island, all of the work being done onshore in preparation for construction will be done with prevailing wage or project labor agreements. This is a huge step forward.
Way off the coast.
way off the coast where nobody has to see the ugly windmill, Some people will use that as an excuse to try to block them from happening. In the maintenance of those wind farms, now there is an agreement that was put into this budget that there has to be labor peace. And in the supply chain, because we know that there will develop a manufacturing industry to support offshore wind. There's going to be Buy American provisions, as well as encouraging American firms to get involved. And so that's one of our objectives here at the Long Island Fed, is not only to do the training and be engaged with that through a national offshore wind training center that we're going to run, but to encourage local firms, particularly unionized firms, to take a look at this industry and get involved, make a commitment, get into it. There's incentives there if they do.
A whole new industry and a whole new career for people, opportunities for people to move forward. So I just want to touch on two things before we go to break. Roger, why don't you just speak a little bit about the COBRA assistance that came about?
The budget provides that people who lost their jobs during this pandemic would be able to keep their health care because everybody's entitled to have COBRA, and which is the federal program that allows you to buy your own insurance if you lose your job. And much of our healthcare system is based on employer-sponsored healthcare programs. So if the employer's out of the picture, what do? You have nothing. So there's incentives and assistance to keep COBRA available to people who lost their jobs, and that's incredibly important and a big initiative.
And we'll be right back with Long Island Fed News.
Congress has the chance to pass the most comprehensive labor law reform in decades, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act. The PRO Act will end years of anti-union policies, would empower workers to exercise the freedom to organize and bargain, repeal right-to-work laws, ensure that workers can reach a first contract quickly after a union is recognized. We need Congress to act now. Take action. Tell your members of Congress to support the PRO Act.
Here's 10 things the PRO Act will do for workers. 1. Anti-union meetings can no longer be required. 90% of employers force their employees to attend anti-union meetings. This will be illegal under the PRO Act. 2. It creates a mediation process. Half of all new unions fail because employers can refuse to negotiate. But the PRO Act ensures a first contract is reached. 3. It effectively ends right to work. 27 states have right-to-work laws, which are really right-to-work-for-less laws. The PRO Act overrides these laws nationally. 4. It gives us more labor rights protections. 54% of workers say they are threatened when organizing, and shamefully 1 in 5 are fired. The PRO Act tightens worker protections. 5. It gives workers more power by removing secondary strike prohibitions, disallowing permanent replacement of workers on strike, and banning proactive lockouts. 6. It requires transparency from employers. Workers' rights must be posted and anti-union consultant contracts must be disclosed. 7. The PRO Act prevents misclassification of workers. Too often employers cheat by labeling their workers as independent contractors. The PRO Act holds employers accountable. 8. It enables meaningful penalties for violations of workers' rights. Employers often face little to no repercussions, but the PRO Act ensures justice for workers. 9. It prohibits the permanent replacement of workers on strike. No more undercutting of skilled workers as employees have done for decades. 10. It allows for more worker solidarity. All prohibitions on solidarity actions for workers across industries and workplaces will be removed. Together we can pass the PRO Act and transform workers' rights in the United States. Check out passtheproact.org to join the fight.
Welcome back to Long Island Fed News. I'm your host, John Durso, with Roger Claim and Ryan Stenton, a monthly podcast of the Long Island Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO. Roger, pick up where we left off.
There were a few things in the American Rescue Plan, which is that large investment that I talked about at the top of the show, that we didn't get into. Ryan, can you talk about some of those?
Pretty vital to our region. Nassau County and Suffolk County were facing significant budget deficits as a result of costs incurred from the experience that the world has gone through in the last year. And so that's going to have a tremendous budget impact with the economy shutting down for a period of time. Ultimately, sales tax revenue takes a hit. And for those that don't know, 2/3 of the county budgets come from sales tax. So in the American Rescue Plan, Nassau County is going to receive $397 million in aid. They received significantly less in previous rounds of federal funding than Suffolk County did. And Suffolk County is going to receive roughly $280 million. And again, they received significantly more in previous rounds of funding. And it's not just the counties that benefit. Ultimately, each of the towns is going to receive investments to ensure that the costs that they've incurred over the last year are now covered. And this is pretty important because we have a region with a very high number of public employees. And we were facing significant budget cuts, which translates into reality. People lose their jobs. And so this is preserving jobs that were vital to getting through the last year and ensured that we could continue to function as a society. We want to make sure those people are able to continue to work. One other major and pretty much historic initiative is there was funding to support multi-employer pensions, which through no fault of the working people that earn those pensions, had a number of businesses go out of business over a period of years, largely, arguably, due to free trade agreements. And so folks that were expecting to retire with some sort of dignity ultimately took a serious hit over a period of years to those benefits. Things they were promised were no longer going to be there. Well, this administration, this United States Senate, and this House of Representatives said, we had a deal, we had an agreement with you, and we're going to back up our word and invest in those multi-employer pensions. And so folks that were expecting a benefit in retirement are now guaranteed that benefit.
Yeah, that's a significant piece, and that's been a fight that's been going on for years. The Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, which is the insurance carrier basically for pension plans, is just about bankrupt because of the various bankruptcies of pension plans. So this legislation supports that, puts money into, and develops a program on how to support those pension plans that have hit on very hard times. Look, there are pension plans that have been devastated because of the bankruptcies of companies, and they have forced the pension plans to make cuts going forward. And for pensioners or future pensioners, this will guarantee their protection so that, as Ryan said, people will be able to continue to retire with dignity. And this is a major win. And we're hopeful, those of us who run pension plans, that we'll be able to build upon this major first step so that we can give even more protection to our pension plans. But this was fabulous. Chuck Schumer for years said, I'm going to make it happen. I can't tell you how many times we've had this conversation. And as he always has done, he's followed through on his word. And we're greatly appreciative of that.
And if it wasn't clear to the listeners, it had nothing to do with the management of the pension plans and everything to do with the corporations and the trade agreements that ultimately mismanaged their economic circumstances. So this really just backs up the workers, and Chuck and the leadership of this country delivered for working people.
Absolutely. And part of the reason that those plans had those experiences is because of mismanagement by corporations, but also because the banking laws in this country put pension plans in the unsecured category. So other people get paid first, but not the pension plans of working Americans. This is a problem. You got me started. This is a problem that we are going to face going forward. This is a problem that has to be addressed because it is unfair. It is wrong that America's pension plans, the lifeblood of people's ability to retire should be put at the bottom of the list of corporate payout for these workers. While the corporation leaders, the executives, and those that they hire, they hire bankruptcy lawyers for $1,000 an hour. But a worker who's making $50,000 or $40,000 a year, he gets nothing out of the bankruptcy. But these corporate mercenaries get all kinds of paydays. They love bankruptcies. It's great for them, but as sure as it is hell for the working men and women of this country. And that is something that we, as an organization, and we working with our political leaders, have to address for the fairness of the banking laws in this country.
Amen. There's something else in the air, which is very positive, and that's organizing. Workers are taking the initiative, and they're joining unions. They need help. The government has been of no help to them, but it's starting to go on, and I think this is part of the climate that we're seeing that relates very closely to our investments in our own infrastructure, but there's a human infrastructure side to this, and that's how people are treated. How do we care for the elderly and those people who are disabled, but how can workers take the initiative to improve their own lives? And there's a flood of small shops being organized. Workers that Mobilize, a community organizing app, announced the formation of a new union as part of the campaign to organize digital employees by CWA. Journalists in the state of Washington at several newspapers and the McClatchy organization organized and now have a union. Workers at the Daily News, which is close to my heart for having fought that fight, and they later lost, the guild workers later lost their union. The guild reorganized, and there's now a guild at that union. RWDSU has a bookstore, in the city that wasn't there before. CVS workers organized under UFCW. And machinists, valve workers in Iowa, 100 of them. Those are big things, little things that are big things. It's going on. So now, I had the personal experience of being part of 3 large campaigns in my life. Yale University with 2,600 workers, Bauman Bus here, 1,700 workers, 600 workers at the University of Connecticut Health Center. These campaigns took a lot of good work, a lot of one-on-ones, a lot of support from the community. That's how things get really changed. Nothing is ever handed to you by the government. And we're seeing that, and unions are starting to realize that you need community allies and you need to relate to the overall concerns of the workers you're trying to organize. That's why issues of race become so important, particularly when you're working in the American South, that if you're just simply ignoring those questions, you're not going to succeed. So I know what it takes sometimes to win these elections, and there's a big one going on right now in Alabama, which it'll get a lot more headlines than the campaigns I just mentioned, but it'll change the nation. John, you know something about this because this is the RWDSU.
Yeah, this in Bessemer, Alabama, this is an absolutely historic campaign. It has attracted attention from all over the world. There were, if people have seen in Miramar, there have been demonstrations against the government. But in the Miramar demonstrations, they were holding signs in support of the Amazon workers in Alabama. 5,600 workers got together with the RWDSU, that's the Retail Wholesale Department Store Union, which is an affiliate of the United Food and Commercial Workers, got together about dignity, respect, and safety. It was not about wages, but it was about dignity and respect and about safety on the job. The fact that they had 8 seconds, every 8 seconds they had to handle a package at that warehouse, that they could only go to the bathroom twice a day, that the pressure was just unbelievable on that shop. And these workers, against America's largest company, against the world's richest man, have stood together to fight for workers' rights. And what's absolutely mind-boggling is that we had a president of the United States who stood up for the workers and said that they should have the right to unionize. We had leaders from around the world speaking about these workers in Bessemer, Alabama. And because of their heroism, because of this work, which is being led by the rank and file members in conjunction with the union, there have been over 1,000 inquiries to the RW office on organizing. 1,000 other groups have come together and said, help us have dignity and respect and safety on the job. This is a turning point. Whether they win this election or not, this is already a victory for the American worker, where across the country, Amazon has knocked down, intimidated workers. In Bessemer, Alabama, they have stood up and said no more. So we don't know the outcome yet, but we know that this fire has been lit in the American spirit about moving forward and being treated properly.
And you know what's so interesting and important about the campaign is the way the RWDSU went about it. This didn't just happen in a vacuum. There are chicken processing workers all around Bessemer, Alabama, and the fact that unionized workers would cross the street, so to speak, and talk to these workers about the importance of being in the union just makes all the difference. And it's making a difference. And that's the history of organizing. You know, you don't do it in a vacuum all by yourself.
Absolutely. And in these communities, and speaking with the leader of the local union down there, they're very much involved with, obviously, the community, but also their church. And the churches and the church leaders have been encouraging and helping these families. You know, in some of our areas of the South, in particular, entire families work at these processing plants. And when somebody is hurt, it doesn't just affect that one person, it affects an entire family. So when they try to speed up the processing in the pork or beef or chicken plants, and they are working with knives and these machineries which will cut your arm off or cut your hand off if it's not handled properly. And they try, because corporations didn't make enough money. Not that they haven't paid any taxes, because they haven't. That's another whole subject. But they want to increase the line speeds, which cuts down on the safety, because they look at these people as if they were widgets instead of human beings. And that is, in that same spirit, is why the workers at Amazon have stood up and said, enough. We are people, we are human beings, we are part of this community, and you need to treat us that way.
And sometimes, John, the commitment of workers goes hand in hand with some legislative initiatives that help make it possible. And one of them is the organization of cannabis workers right here in New York. And that's made possible by some actions taken by the legislature, but also some groundwork laid by your union.
Yeah, well, we're very, very pleased. We're very thankful for the leadership of Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins and Crystal Peoples-Stokes, the Deputy Majority Leader of the Assembly, and, of course, the Speaker, Carl Hastie. Their leadership on this, in conjunction with the governor and Liz Kruger, who is the main sponsor of the bill. This is an historic piece of legislation that will address some of the ills that have happened for the various communities where that have been mistreated over the years. But it also opens up the ability for cannabis to expand. We've seen that the medical cannabis has been a godsend for those people who are suffering from the results of chemotherapy or having seizures. It's been nothing but a godsend. But the decriminalization of cannabis will, in fact, help those communities who have been disadvantaged. And the jobs that it created, these are good paying jobs. There are currently, we have 8 companies under contract, and those workers have good paying jobs with good benefits, and they are very proud of the work that they do. It is an opportunity to start another industry, like we started a wind industry here in Long Island. This is a new industry that will welcome good jobs and good pay, and the ability for people to have dignity and respect on the job, which is really the key.
And another small organizing win that I didn't mention was Comcast workers in Massachusetts that just won a battle after 7.5 years to get a first contract. That's wrong. Workers organize, they go through the difficulties of coming together, winning an election, and then the company won't give them a first contract. So that problem, as well as the harassment workers face, is addressed by the PRO Act. And Ryan, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the advantages the PRO Act will bring to organizing?
You just laid out the obvious case for our listeners as to why the PRO Act is so necessary. You had a group of workers that organized, said, we want to be in a union. Our labor laws allegedly give them that right. They chose to exercise that right. And because our labor laws are outdated, they're not strong enough to protect us in the workplace. They had to wait 7.5 years for a contract. So the PRO Act makes some changes to labor law in this country. It provides incentives and penalties it provides penalties for corporations that choose to interfere with workers exercising their rights by law. And so right now, there's corporations will arrogantly administer multi-million-dollar campaigns to union bust and run anti-union campaigns and just do it with the arrogance of, nobody's going to do anything. And unfortunately, for decades, that's been true. Under the current administration and with the leadership of Senator Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, we finally have leaders in this country that are not only stepping up legislatively, but they're also actively saying, I support unions, I support the creation of union jobs. And to anyone that, says, all right, they're talking the talk, but we're watching them talk the talk and walk the walk. They're proposing this legislation. The PRO Act passed the House with bipartisan support, so this is not a Democrat, this is not a Republican policy. This is about working people. We know that there's support for it. It passed the House of Representatives last year. It passed again this year. And under the leadership of Senator Schumer, we're confident that ultimately this is going to get sent to the president's desk. But that doesn't happen without working people across this country flooding the Senate and telling them, we need this. This matters to us. This will change our families' lives. They have to understand that this policy is not just a policy to be written in law and sit on books somewhere, but this actually has an effect on people's ability to demand dignity in the workplace, improve their wages, have access to health care, and have a voice in the workplace. Full stop. That's what this is about. And it's our listeners and workers across this country that need to call into the Senate and say, this needs to come up for a vote, and you need to support it.
John, April 28th, is Workers' Memorial Day. It's the 50th anniversary of the passage of the Occupational Safety and Health Act. We're going to do an observance where we usually do it at the Workers' Memorial in Hauppauge at the State Office Building. It's going to be outside, so it should be safe. Want everybody to come, wear a mask, be there, talk about the people we've lost. We mourn for the dead and we fight for the living, and there's a lot to fight for. Now we seem to have some of the tools to do it. You know, this is hard to wrap your head around. One construction worker dies every 5 days, and 86% of the deaths in New York are on the private non-union sector, and 93% of those are in the city. This is what's going on in the non-union construction sector. So there's an obvious connection here with the PRO Act, where workers have a voice and they can stand up for the conditions that they work under every day. They have a pretty good expectation of coming home the way they left in the morning. But in the non-union sector, where workers are hushed and threatened and forced to work on jobs that they know are unsafe, they die or they get injured. And, 50,000 deaths occur every year because of occupational diseases that people incurred earlier. That's what OSHA was designed to address. So this is an important observance for us.
Absolutely. Workers' Memorial Day, April 28th, it is our holiday to remember those who went to work and never made it home. It is something that we should all observe. And Roger and Ryan, as we close, we are very, very fortunate. We live in such an amazing time. We have the ability to be vaccinated, and we're hopeful that people will take that step and vaccinate and protect all of us. We have the PRO Act, which is so vital for working families here in this country. We have the infrastructure bill, which needs to get done to protect not only our economy, our workers, but our ability to move about in this country and to continue to build good middle-class jobs. And then we have the voting rights bill, which is being discussed now. And what are we all about? About the ability for people to exercise their right to vote in an election. And we are encouraging all of our elected officials to support that Voting Rights Act. Supplanting or taking a step backwards to disadvantage people from having the right to vote is against everything that this country stands for. It goes against everything that we believe in. So if you're looking to hold people back from voting, you're doing a disservice to this country. And we're looking forward to having these bills passed. So with that, thank you all for listening. This has been the Long Island Fed News with your host, John Durso, Roger Clayman, and Ryan Stanton, a monthly podcast of the Long Island Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO. Thank you.